Let me ask you a strange question. How can withdrawing $20,000 from your own retirement account make the IRS treat it like you earned more than $30,000? It sounds impossible. After all, it's your money. You saved it. You already paid taxes on some of it. Taking $20,000 out should mean exactly that. $20,000. But for many retirees in the United States, that single withdrawal can quietly trigger 3 different reactions at the same time. Your taxable income jumps higher than expected. More of your Social Security suddenly becomes taxable. And down the road, your Medicare premiums can rise because of it. All from one decision that seemed completely harmless. And here's the twist. Most people never realize until it's too late in retirement. The order you withdraw your money can matter more than the investments you made to build it. When you were working, your financial life followed a rhythm that felt predictable. Every 2 weeks or once a month, a paycheck arrived. Taxes were already withheld, benefits were handled automatically, and you knew roughly how much money you could spend. Retirement changes that rhythm completely. Your paycheck doesn't disappear because you stop needing income. It disappears because now you have to create that paycheck yourself. Instead of one employer sending you money, retirement income usually comes from several different places. For many Americans, the first piece is Social Security. Some people may also have a pension or annuity, providing a steady monthly payment. But for millions of retirees, those sources rarely cover everything they want to spend. That's where savings come in. Over the years, many households build wealth across several types of accounts. Some money sits in traditional retirement accounts like a 401k or a traditional IRA. Some is invested in taxable brokerage accounts, and some is stored in Roth accounts designed to grow tax-free. On paper, this seems like a great advantage. You have multiple pools of money to draw from. But here's the hidden challenge most people don't realize at first. Each of those dollars is treated differently by the tax system. To you, a dollar is just a dollar. But to the IRS, the story changes depending on where that dollar came from. A withdrawal from a traditional IRA is treated one way. A sale from a brokerage account is treated another way. And a qualified withdrawal from a Roth account may be treated differently again. This means retirement income is not just about how much money you have saved. It's about how you turn that money into income year after year. And this is where many retirees make an expensive mistake. They look at their accounts, see which one has the largest balance, and start withdrawing from that account first. It feels logical. Use the biggest bucket first. But that simple decision can quietly trigger a chain reaction across your taxes, your Social Security benefits, and even your Medicare costs. And most people don't realize it until years later. Once you understand that retirement income comes from multiple accounts, the next step is realizing that the tax system does not treat those accounts equally. Behind the scenes, there are 3 powerful forces that can quietly reduce how much of your money you actually keep. Most retirees never notice these forces at first because they don't show up all at once. They appear slowly, sometimes years after the original withdrawal. But once they start interacting with each other, the effect can be surprisingly expensive. The first force is ordinary income tax. Money withdrawn from traditional retirement accounts like a traditional IRA or a 401k is generally treated the same way as salary. Every dollar that comes out is counted as ordinary income. That means it fills up your tax brackets just like a paycheck once did. In recent tax brackets for married couples filing jointly, the 12% bracket runs from about $23,850 up to roughly $96,950 of taxable income. Once income moves above that range, the next bracket begins at 22%. At first glance, this doesn't seem dramatic, but retirement income rarely exists in isolation, which leads to the second force. The second force is what many financial planners informally call the Social Security tax torpedo. Social Security benefits are not always tax-free. In fact, depending on your combined income, up to 85% of those benefits can become taxable. The formula is based on something called combined income. This includes your adjusted gross income, plus any tax-free interest, plus half of your Social Security benefits. For married couples filing jointly, the long-standing thresholds are surprisingly low. If combined income stays below $32,000, Social Security benefits are generally not taxable. Between $32,000 and $44,000, up to 50% of benefits can become taxable. And once combined income rises above $44,000, as much as 85% of benefits can be taxed. These thresholds were set decades ago and were never indexed for inflation. So over time, more retirees are pulled into this system without realizing it. What makes this tricky is that a relatively small withdrawal from a traditional IRA can push combined income higher, which then causes more of your Social Security to become taxable. Suddenly, one decision affects two different parts of your tax return. The third force arrives a little later, but it can still have a significant impact. This is Medicare's income-related monthly adjustment amount, often shortened to IRMAAs. Medicare looks back at your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years earlier. If that number rises above certain thresholds, your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums increase in steps. For example, in 2025, the first IRMAA tier begins when modified adjusted gross income exceeds $106,000 for single filers or $212,000 for married couples filing jointly. Crossing that line, even by a small amount, can mean paying higher premiums every month. Individually, each of these forces might seem manageable. A little more tax here, a slightly higher premium there. But when they happen together, the effect can feel very different. A single withdrawal from the wrong account can increase ordinary income, make more Social Security taxable, and push your income closer to a Medicare premium threshold all at the same time. And that is why the order of withdrawals matters far more than many retirees initially expect. At this point, the numbers might start to feel a little overwhelming. You hear about tax brackets, combined income formulas, and Medicare thresholds, and suddenly retirement planning sounds like a complicated tax manual. So let's slow this down for a moment. Hi, it's Ted again. I'm here to walk through a few simple examples so the ideas are easier to understand. I'm not a financial professional giving personalized advice, just someone helping you see how the system works. Because once you step back and look at it clearly, one idea becomes surprisingly simple. In retirement, the dollars you spend may look exactly the same in your bank account, but they are not the same in the eyes of the tax system. Imagine $3 sitting on the table in front of you. The first dollar comes from a traditional IRA or a 401k. The second dollar comes from a taxable brokerage account where your investments have grown over time. And the third dollar comes from a Roth account that has already satisfied the age and 5-year rules. If you take any of those dollars and spend them on dinner, a trip, or a gift for your family, the experience feels identical. But inside the tax system, they behave very differently. A dollar coming out of a traditional IRA is usually treated as ordinary income. It works almost like the paycheck you used to receive during your working years. That dollar increases your adjusted gross income, fills up your tax brackets, and can affect several other parts of your financial picture. A dollar from a taxable brokerage account may be treated differently depending on how the money was created. If the growth qualifies as long-term capital gains, the tax rate may be lower than ordinary income. In certain income ranges, those gains can even fall into the 0% long-term capital gains bracket. Then there's the Roth dollar. If the withdrawal is qualified, the dollar generally does not show up as taxable income at all. It does not increase your ordinary income. It usually does not affect the Social Security combined income calculation, and it typically does not push you closer to Medicare, MAA thresholds. So even though each of those dollars can buy the exact same dinner or plane ticket, the tax system treats them like completely different types of income. And this is where a lot of retirement strategies start to change, because the real question stops being, which account has the most money? Instead, the more important question becomes, which dollar causes the least damage when I spend it? Once you begin thinking about retirement income this way, the order you withdraw from your accounts is no longer a small detail. It becomes one of the most powerful tools you have to control your taxes over the next 20 or 30 years. Once you realize that different dollars behave differently in the tax system, the next question becomes obvious. If the same spending money can come from different places, how do you decide which account to use first? There isn't a single perfect formula that works for every household. Your health, your state taxes, your savings, and your retirement timeline can all change the math. But there is a general pattern that many retirees use once they understand how these pieces interact. It usually starts with recognizing that the early years of retirement often create a unique window of opportunity. Imagine someone who has just retired in their mid or late 60s. Their paycheck has stopped, which means their ordinary income may temporarily drop. At the same time, they might delay Social Security to increase their future monthly benefit. For a few years, they are living mostly from savings. During this window, their taxable income is often lower than it will be later in life. And that changes the strategy. Instead of avoiding taxes completely in those early years, some retirees choose to fill up the lower tax brackets in a controlled way. They may draw part of their spending from taxable brokerage accounts while also taking modest withdrawals from traditional retirement accounts. The goal is not to eliminate taxes today. The goal is to prevent a much larger tax problem later. Think about a couple like Arthur and Denise who recently retired. They want to spend about $90,000 per year. If they claim Social Security now, their combined benefit could be around $48,000 annually. They also have money saved across several accounts, about $500,000 in a taxable brokerage account, roughly $700,000 in traditional retirement accounts like IRAs and 401ks, and another $300,000 in Roth accounts. If Arthur and Denise simply look at their balances and start withdrawing from the largest account first, they might pull heavily from their traditional retirement accounts. On the surface, that seems reasonable. That account holds the most money. But large withdrawals from those accounts can quickly increase ordinary income, which may bring more of their Social Security into the taxable range and move them closer to Medicare premium thresholds. Instead, they might approach their income differently. They could cover part of their spending from their taxable brokerage account, where some gains may fall into lower long-term capital gains rates. At the same time, they might take smaller controlled withdrawals from their traditional accounts to fill up lower tax brackets without pushing income too high. Meanwhile, they allow their Roth accounts to continue growing tax-free, keeping them available for later years when flexibility might matter even more. Over time, this approach can gradually reduce the size of their traditional retirement accounts before required minimum distributions begin. Smaller balances can mean smaller mandatory withdrawals in their 70s, and that can translate into more control over taxes for the rest of retirement. In other words, the strategy is not about draining one bucket completely before touching another. It's about blending withdrawals carefully so that each year of retirement stays within a range that keeps taxes and premiums manageable. By the time many people reach retirement, they spend decades focusing on one goal, building the biggest nest egg possible. They compare investment returns, worry about market swings, and try to grow their accounts as much as they can. And that focus makes sense. But once retirement actually begins, the game quietly changes. At that point, success is no longer determined only by how much money you saved. It's also determined by how efficiently you can turn those savings into income. Two retirees could start with the same portfolio value, the same mix of accounts, and the same retirement age. Yet 20 years later, one of them may have far more money remaining than the other. Not because they picked better stocks, but because they managed their withdrawals more carefully. When you understand how different accounts interact with taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, you begin to see retirement planning in a different light. The order of withdrawals becomes a tool, not just a detail. Instead of reacting to taxes every April, you start shaping your income intentionally year after year. Hi, it's Ted again for a moment. I'm not here as a financial professional giving you personalized advice. These are simply examples meant to help you see how the system works, so the ideas are easier to understand. Because once you see the pattern, the lesson becomes surprisingly simple. Retirement is not just about growing money. It's about keeping more of what you've already earned. The way you withdraw from your accounts can quietly shape your tax bill, your Social Security taxation, and even your Medicare costs over the next 20 or 30 years. So if there is one idea worth remembering from this conversation, it might be this. In retirement, the smartest strategy is not always the one that avoids taxes completely this year. Often, the smarter strategy is the one that keeps your taxes steadier and more manageable across the entire journey. And sometimes, the difference between those two approaches can add up to far more than most people expect. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. I'd be curious to hear what mix of accounts you have for retirement and whether you've ever thought about the order you withdraw from them. Because the next step in retirement planning isn't just saving money, it's learning how to use it wisely.